on Manx Radio, another radio replay, celebrating 60 years of the many varied programmes produced by the Nation Station. Ever wondered what goes into producing a radio documentary? Where do the ideas come from? And the contributors, for that matter? What about the production, the content and editing of the same? Last week in this very Island Life slot, we treated you to a replay of a programme from The Tell Me Project, a series that brought school children together in conversation with some of their older relatives to reminisce and reflect on days gone by. After production was complete on the series, we made an additional programme, looking at how the series came to be and what went into bringing it to life. Here's our Mark Tiley to tell you more.
Welcome to this third and final programme in the Tell Me series for 2009. In this programme, we go behind the scenes of the project and speak to the people who made it all happen. The original idea for the Tell Me project came about after Professor Hugh Davidson had researched his own family history. Dan Walker asked Hugh to explain how the project developed from there.
I enjoyed doing it so much that I thought it would be interesting to encourage other people to do it. And then my wife had the idea of having school children talk to older people and doing it online. So that's really how it started. It was my wife's idea.
I presume the idea behind having children interviewing adults is that obviously it's an interesting way of doing it, but also it's a learning experience for both sides.
Absolutely right. I think from the point of view of children, it's got academic value in that you cover social history, citizenship, Manx culture and heritage. It's also skill building because you develop skills in using microphones, face-to-face interviewing, preparation, analysis, and also interviewing. And it's quite impressive the level of interviewing skills the pupils had. From the point of view of old people, it's an opportunity to get recognition for their many achievements in life. And very importantly, I think, it builds links between the two generations. So older people realise that younger people aren't all hoodies, and young people recognise that older people are very interesting. And anybody who reads the 2009 Tell Me book will be left in no doubt at all that older people are extremely interesting.
Can you call to mind any particular stories that really moved you?
Yes, some of the interviews were very moving. We had a number of World War II interviews, and one of them was with a career soldier, and he commanded the last Polish unit in the British Army. It was after the Second World War. These Poles were getting on a bit and due for retirement, so he was able to organise a satisfactory and fair retirement for them. But when he had to say goodbye to them, it was quite an emotional moment for all of them, and they insisted on wrapping him in the Polish flag. And they said to him, "We would like your army unit to remember us with this flag. Will you look after it for us, please?" And he said, "Yes, I will." And the flag was framed and put in the Army Corps headquarters in Germany. And every year he calls up and he checks that flag is still in the same place, because he remembers being wrapped in the flag so vividly, even though it was a long time ago. I mean, these kind of stories are so remarkable for people who live today, because most of the people who had these memories, probably between 65 and 75, they had pretty hard lives, but they seem to have made the most of the opportunities that they had.
Penny Crichton, Chief Executive of Age Concern on the Isle of Man, has been involved with the project since the very beginning, and Dan asked her about the project's origins.
We started off by doing roadshows around the secondary schools and inviting the primary schools in to see what was going on. And we hoped to sort of enthuse people and see the whites of their eyes and get them really excited about this, because it was about capturing the social history of the island and people who came from other parts. But it was more than that. It was about changing attitudes. And in the UK, you've got older people who, for whatever reason, are called the wrinklies. I mean, and the younger people are called the hoodies. And it was about getting that understanding where there weren't any wrinkles or hoodies, they were just people. And then that chasm of the intergenerational gap was made into a level playing field, so that we wanted youth to understand old age and the wisdom there, and old age to understand youth and how different perhaps life was for them as to when they lived their childhood. To me, at Age Concern, that's been one of the biggest bonuses. When you go to a Tell Me session, the air is absolutely buzzing with anticipation. The students are well rehearsed, they know what they want to say. We've got state-of-the-art recording equipment. I think it's even better than you've got here, actually. And then they pose this wonderful question, the students, the children, to the older person, and they say, tell me what it was like when. And then, wow, all of the stories we've had absolutely give you goosebumps and make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Absolutely brilliant.
A really good example of that was the Vince Corellius interview. I think it was his granddaughter.
Yes.
And she didn't really know anything about this.
No.
And you can hear in the voice as it's going on,
incredulity,
wow.
Absolutely. It is the wow factor. It is the wow. And for whatever reason, everyone's busy nowadays. And I think we all communicate by phone, by email, by whatever method, and we don't write letters anymore. Everything is wham, quick. But to actually take time out and develop the art of listening and the art of conversation, and realising from a young person's point of view that, wow, the old people used to get up to exactly the same kind of things as they get up to. And they had their sadnesses, their sorrows, their happinesses, they had their adventures. Realising a world where there were no credit cards or no TV or very few toys to play with has been absolutely eye-opening for some young people.
So what was your role in bringing this part of the Tell Me project together?
My role was to work with Hugh Davison to get sponsorship to make the project viable, and then with Hugh to go around the schools and do the road shows, because I was 15 years in education before I retired, and then I became the chief executive of Age Concern. So if you like, I had a foot in both camps. Elderly people and education, which was good. We've got 5 day centres, and we offer 20,000 day places a year. And these day centres are all over the island. So it was making sure and encouraging people in the day centres and people in schools to actually talk to each other. And that's been amazing, really good.
Yeah, and what's the feedback been like? More from the elderly people than the school children.
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. So to sometimes, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, as you get older, you become invisible. And that is one of the cruelest things in the world. People who've lived their lives and had lots and lots of experiences are just dying to talk about them. And to find that, for instance, we've got a day centre at Retna Bay, and St Mary's Primary School came to talk to the clients there, and it ended up with one of the clients playing the piano and everybody singing, and it was absolutely amazing. The feedback from the older people has been one of absolute generosity, I think, towards the young people. They've loved meeting them. Some of them haven't got grandchildren, and just to see young people being enthusiastic, wanting to talk to them, wanting to know about it, has really given them things to talk about, things to think about for many days to come, and you can't get better than that.
Penny Crichton of Age Concern. Adam Creemore was one of our interviewers from St Ninian's High School. He told Dan about some of the challenges he faced whilst making the recordings.
Sometimes you do sort of find halfway through an interview it's like, OK, now I'm just going to have to try and get a couple of questions on the fly until I can try and think up a couple of extras. So I'm fairly sure in mine there are a couple of and so what were your favourite foods during the war, kind of thing, which were promptly edited out afterwards. But
did you pick it up quite quickly, or?
Oh yeah, quite often as well. If we wanted to just sort of pause the interview, mid-interview, and the people, I interviewed Major Charles Wilson. He had a couple of ideas about his time he spent in Oman, working there in the army there. So he sort of provided a couple of ideas, which was rather handy when you dried up.
We've been doing it for years as a homework project. I've been always quite keen for pupils to speak to their relatives, get something written down, and it's there for posterity, for when they're getting older. You've got something written down for future grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. So there's a record for the family. That's always been my first port of call, and it remains that. But we just got involved in the sort of like the wider Tell Me project. So this is something we've been doing for about 5 or 6 years on our own, and the Tell Me project fitted in with what we were doing.
But of course it expands on that. It brings a sort of audio aspect.
Yes, it does. Yeah, all the stuff we were doing was in writing, in written form. So it just expands on it, and we end up getting them in from the best interviews. So it's held open to the whole of Year 9, and the best ones come in with their relatives, and some of them speak to World War II veterans who we know, and people like that, just to sort of expand it, like you say.
Andrew Wilkinson, Head of History at St Ninian's High School, and before him, Adam Creemore. You're listening to the third and final programme in the Tell Me series for 2009 here on Manx Radio.
This year there's been a few little tweaks to the format, hasn't there?
Yes, that's right. We've got about the same number of interviews this year, about 55. And last year it was all organised by school. Overall, about half the schools have participated to date in the first couple of years. But we thought this year we'd theme it because we thought that would be more valuable from an academic point of view for the schools. So we've got 7 themes, I think, this year. World War II away, which is people who are fighting. World War II home. We've got farming. We've got medicine and health. Early days, community life. And this year, for the first time, we've got Girl Guides, where it's their 100th anniversary next year. So we got 5 interviews this year just to start things off, and we'll have more next year. And also this year we thought we'd involve a good role model, and we chose James Toseland as somebody representing our kind of values. And so James came along to Ramsey Grammar School, caused a great deal of excitement, and he was interviewed by 7 different pupils on 4 different topics.
I imagine the excitement wasn't just in the pupils, though, was it?
Well, that's right. Everywhere he went, people, particularly young ladies, wanted to be photographed with him with their mobile cameras, and some of the mothers heard James was coming along, and it was quite difficult to persuade them that they didn't really need to be there.
And that's obviously, that adds just a little bit more sort of flavour, if you will, to what's already quite a significant project. I believe there's been interest from overseas through the website.
There definitely has, and I was asked by the chief executive of the Institute of Philanthropy, wonderful name, Dr. Salvatore La Spada. So Sal asked me to give a talk to a group of international philanthropists in New York at the Rockefeller Foundation on Tell Me. So I gave a talk to about 30 of them, and they were mainly American and Canadian, but some Europeans as well, and they were terribly impressed by the project, and I think very importantly, none of them had come across anything like it before anywhere else. So we've also searched the internet, and we think this particular program, organised like it is online, is unique in the world. So we're keen to expand it. There's been interest in Toronto and New York and Arizona. We're also starting a pilot in Gloucestershire, in Stroud, and the Archway Secondary School in Stroud are going to be the focal point with some primary schools of our Gloucestershire pilot test, which my cousin Nicholas Quayle, who lives there, is going to mastermind.
Without the website, I don't think the project could really run. Right from the start, there's information on how the teachers should get involved with the project. It gathers all the interviews for the project, all the audio, all the video is hosted on the website. And from there, the book is produced, the audio is transcribed. We have 10 moderators that are volunteers based at AXA. They use the website to moderate all the interviews, etc. Plus, I mean, Hugh and Penny's plans are to expand worldwide on this project. Obviously, we're only on the Isle of Man at the moment, so the website has to be able to take up that slack in future years.
That's quite a significant feature, isn't it? I mean, the book is, maybe you could say the book was the core of it, but the website is what brings it to a wider audience, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously there's no restriction on who sees the website and who views the interviews. The book at the moment is published on the Isle of Man, and it's mainly Manx residents and people who have been involved with the project who purchased the book. But obviously the website's available worldwide. So, it's bringing it to a wider audience. We've had views from Alaska, Japan, obviously Eastern Europe as well. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So you can actually see that information. You can see that people are looking at this.
That's right. We're keeping a tab on all the statistics to see who's viewing what, what kind of technology they're using to view it with, etc. So,
do you get a lot of communication through the website? Do people contact you?
We get a few questions through there. Most of them actually from teachers who are involved in the project, but there are one or two inquiries coming from outside of the Isle of Man, particularly the UK, asking how they can get involved.
And what sort of features have you built into the website?
Well, the biggest feature is the search feature. When the interviews are uploaded onto the site, there's a facility in there which actually indexes all the words in the interview, so you can search by any kind of phrase or any stock word in there. They're all categorised, the interviews as well. Obviously, it's more difficult to do with audio, but once they're transcribed, we try and get the words onto the site, and they're all indexed. And hopefully, that makes it very flexible for research purposes. And I'm sure, Manx Radio putting these programmes together have found that facility useful.
Chris Redman from AXA, the man responsible for the excellent website, which is thetellmeproject, all one word, .com.
You're listening to a Manx Radio replay of The Tell Me Project, the first episode in a series that was broadcast and produced in 2009.
Here's another of our interviewers, Danielle Mather.
I think that it's obviously a lot different from just copying stuff out of the book, and I found out quite a lot of stuff that I didn't already know, and it was quite interesting to see the old photographs that my nana showed me of during the period of the war, and it was quite interesting when I was interviewing her because she also added in some things that I didn't already know. I learned quite a lot from doing it, and it's a lot different from just doing normal work.
What a lot of parents say is that their parents, the people who are being interviewed, say things to the grandchildren that they wouldn't say to them. There's a lot of anecdotal things that come out and say, oh, you never told me that. So I think that's quite a good, it's the intergenerational thing that Age Concern are trying to get over, and it works quite well from that side of things.
So it really does sort of bring generations together.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ideas behind it. The image that school children have got of old people is that they're a bit miserable. The image that old people have of school children is that they're the vandals and yobs sometimes, and that dismisses this sort of image, I hope.
You guys spoke to Second World War, or at least military veterans. What sort of thing did you get out of that interview?
Because my veteran was involved in little-known wars, which were not really taught about in school, I thought it was good because he had sort of anecdotes about when he was in the Aden and when he was in the Yemen and Iran. So I thought it was good to sort of learn outside the classroom.
And obviously, we're living in the 21st century. It's despite what happens in Iraq and Afghanistan, we live in a peaceful world, but they lived in a completely different sort of world, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they lived in a world where war was a reality, it wasn't an option, because there was all this sort of, he was talking about Cold War tension between Russia, and he was one of the main guys who, if the Russians did invade Germany, he was going to be sent in to organise sort of a defence.
So once you've done the interviews, could you just tell us a bit about what happens then?
After that, you got a lot of technical stuff to work out about like how you do a lot of editing of just when sometimes you slip up on a question or something.
And you do that editing yourself, do you?
Yeah, and then you have to like put into a sound file and this and that, so it goes on the website.
And the website is sort of the core of the whole project, is it?
Yeah.
It brings it together. And once it's on the website, people presumably can search it and find things related by category. And then it's turned into a book.
Yeah, they select 50 or so interviews, and they're all going into a book.
We brought Alex Townsend in on his computer bus and did the interviews, did the editing on the computer bus, sent the interviews off to Chris Redman. He coordinates everything. There's volunteers from AXA who go through the transcripts and write them all out. I think there's something where it also goes to the Manx Museum as well, so it'll be archived for good in the Manx Museum. And the best ones, I think there's been over 100 this year from various places, schools, guide groups and various other groups. The best ones have been put in the book, but everything else is there as well. So it's not just these sort of like select few.
Yeah.
So there's on the website and in the Manx Museum archives. It's all there for time immemorial, I hope.
What were the most interesting things you found out through your interviews?
Personally, that finding out Charles's experience of his time as a mercenary in the Omani army, and hearing about people he met there, and finding out all about that area of the world. It's very interesting.
Because it's not something you'd expect your normal man on the street in the Isle of Man to have experienced, is it? And you could potentially pass him by without knowing these things.
Of course, yeah.
And what was yours?
There were a few anecdotes I liked. I quite liked the one where he was talking about when he was stationed in Berlin, when of course there was West Berlin and East Berlin, and how the Russians tried to get him drunk and they all had a big party so he would like give information about stuff. And he said, "Well, I hope I didn't."
Probably simply like how it feels to be in the war doing these things. Like he gave us this description of when he was in a tank, being shot at in a tank. Any one of the people manning the tank at the time could have been shot, and you wouldn't have known about it except for the massive hole, and they would just it'd just blow straight through the tank and they'd just be dead instantly. And things like that, and he managed to really convey this fear when he was talking to me about it, and the strength of emotions, very interesting.
Yeah, and again, completely out of our daily experience.
Yeah.
And my nana came over, well, she lived on the island and she went over to Kent to visit family, and she told me about when she went over, and it was completely different over in Kent to over here, because she told me about the Doodlebug bombs, and that I don't actually think that we covered it in history before. I learnt what they did during the raids and stuff, and also discovered that after the war bananas came over for the first time.
and that was something that was new to them. They'd not seen bananas.
Yeah. I remember my granddad said, because I interviewed him as well, he said that he tried one and he didn't even think it was worth him coming over because he didn't like them.
And did you enjoy yourselves? Did you have fun doing it?
Definitely.
The voices there of Jack Gibney, who actually won the award for the best interview in 2009, Andrew Wilkinson, Adam Creemore, Ailish Swift and Danielle Mather. Finally in this programme, we return to Professor Hugh Davidson. And Dan wanted to know what the future held for the project.
This has been funded for 4 years by our family trust, the H&S Davidson Trust, and AXA Isle of Man for 4 years. We're now in year 2. We're moving into year 3, and we'll go for year 4. What we try and do every year is to refresh the programme slightly. So what we're doing next year is, again, we're staying with the theme. So we'll pick 7 or 8 themes. And then I think what we are likely to do is to identify a number of people who are particularly knowledgeable about those themes, whether it be farming or fishing or history of politics, and approach them to be interviewed and then link them into a school. And that will save time for schools because they'll be able to allocate maybe, half a day and half a dozen pupils to interviewing 3 or 4 people. And it would also enable us to tap the very rich resource of memories that the island has. I think it's the kind of thing that an island can do better than other people, and a small place can do better than a bigger place. But the whole idea of memory seems to have growing appeal these days.
My thanks to everyone involved in the Tell Me project, to the interviewers, to our guests, and to the organisers. And to Dan Walker for putting this programme together. But before we finish, here's a reminder of why this whole project is just so important.
What was it like actually being in a battle? I can't really describe it to you. It's horrendous, really. It's they always say a soldier's first battle is his best because he doesn't know what to expect. And on my first battle, I was driving a tank when I went into battle first, and we went sailing on. We met a few infantry and that sort of thing, which we sort of quickly disposed of. But we quickly ran into the German tanks and anti-tank guns, and we soon realised that things weren't going to be pleasant. And within minutes, the tanks were hit and knocked and on fire and that sort of thing. And a burning tank is a horrible thing, really. It's like a dragon with flames spurting out from it, and if the men are injured when they're in it, they can't get out and all that sort of thing. It's not very pleasant.
Many thanks to Mark and all of the wonderful contributors, both young and young at heart, producers, guests and the rest. Tune in same time next week for another radio replay, celebrating 60 years of programmes and broadcasts from your nation station. For now, thanks for listening.